What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly movie podcast for shows that have been rebooted, remade, sequelized, or otherwise not the first in a series or franchise, and why we keep going back to these wells. There's just so many of them. As always, I'm your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And evil dies tonight. Or does it? Could it ever die? All these questions and more tonight on 60 Minutes. Can evil die? Halloween Kills, the sequel to the 2018 Halloween requel that is, the now fifth timeline of the Michael Myers universe. You've got your sacred timeline, which will be our original sequels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You've got your Season of the Witch World, just Halloween 3. You've got your Rob Zombie movies. You've got your H2O and Resurrection, and we are here for the fifth world. I didn't think that Michael Myers would be the next, maybe a multiverse.
Let's do a multiverse of yeah.
Get them all in there. But here we are. You only need to see 2 movies to see this one, but it is egregious how many you can ignore.
Yeah.
But it's here now. Halloween Kills, the highly anticipated sequel, the middle movie of a known trilogy for Halloween Ends next year. Debuted in theaters and on Peacock. Terrence, what did you think of Halloween Kills?
Yeah. So I saw this in the theaters. I opted out of the Peacock experience, even though I have it. Although I guess anybody could. You can watch this for free if you just download Peacock. I went to the theater and watched it, and it's sort of a mixed bag for me. I hate these titles being the same. I really enjoyed the previous entry to the 2018 Halloween quite a bit. I liked it a lot. This one, it was the first act of it is really herky for me. It does this thing where it creates a lot of found footage or past footage of flashbacks and let's recreate this, and this stuff's always been known or always been around, and kind of does that. It's a pet peeve of mine, but if it can be done well, I don't mind it all the time. This one, because it's spliced in so oddly, it just feels weird, because I feel like this movie would have done a bit better for me had it just picked up right where the last one ended, where we have the ladies on the back of the truck going to the hospital. I feel like that would have been a better pickup. But overall, I know a lot of people had complaints about the body count for the 2018 Halloween. This one definitely makes up for that in droves.
Which is silly, because in the first John Carpenter's Halloween, he kills, I believe, 5 people.
I think we find out in this that it's probably about 3 or 4, because some people who were believed to have been gone that made it through. But yes.
And so in the beginning of David Gordon Green's, you hear him, they're talking about, these 5 murders, this massacre. And I was like, Michael Myers in this movie that y'all said the body count is lower, kills twice that many people before he's even in the second act. Correct. I know a lot of it was off camera, but guess what? Halloween was also the goreless, bloodless movie. This was the whole point, was to pull your eye to one side of the camera and scare you at the other end with tension and moments. There's not a lot of blood and gore.
The camera tricks and the way that things were shot was sort of the selling point for that Carpenter Halloween. And so the body count never was a thing that really mattered in this series, which is why I was like, why is this all of a sudden a thing here?
Most horror movies, I think, have smaller body counts than people realize.
I agree.
I'm more often watching myself being like, oh yeah, there's 3 deaths here.
Right. And typically not main characters. A lot of the stuff that exists for the Scream franchise, as long as it has, you're like, well, these people keep making it through. And you're like, oh yeah, because only 3 other people have died, and it happens to not be them. But for this one, the body count is excessively high. It's nuts. They completely turn it on. And there's some cool deaths. This one, unlike the Carpenter one, does start showing you a lot. Sometimes it's just one of those weird things where they show you gore and show you everything. You're like, cool for the first 4 times. It's like, this is pretty cool. And towards the back end, it'd be like, guys, you have desensitized me to any type of surprise from these gory deaths. I am no longer am that amazed by the death. So it runs its course towards the back end, but it's still fun. That's Michael Myers himself is still fun. But I think the trick was to make the body count so high that it tried to pay people to ignore that this script is really paper thin, which sucks to be the branching bridge between for the trilogy, there's not a lot that happens here that moves the franchise forward one way or the other. I think there's a pretty cool concept of how does a person who has created murder on a town, how does the town people affect, how does that affect the town people? How does that make their mentality? I think there's a cool concept being played there. I just think it's played real ham-fisted, and we'll get into the whole evil dies tonight mob mentality thing that I don't think works at all in this film. And I think that the ending of this movie is terrible. I think it is god awful. And I don't mean the actual final part. I just mean the sequence where the mob meets Michael Myers. It does not play well. I don't know what the hell they were going for. It does not work for me. And so all in all, it's a sort of a mixed bag, which I think the previous film did a lot better. Just character moments with both Laurie and Michael, whereas this movie is like Michael just murdering a ton of people, and Laurie is on the shelf for a good majority of this film.
Yes, I completely agree. I felt the same way. Now, when I was in the theater in my Dolby surround sound and leaning back with my popcorn and shaking in the seat, I loved the ride. But like a good roller coaster, I got off the ride and was like, that was fun. And that's kind of all it was. I agree. We get into some really interesting ideas about trauma and who it affects and who is Michael Myers and what is he after and what motivates him, which are all questions that have been explored and have ruined the franchise in the past. Because I go back, like the filmmakers, to the first Halloween movie where he's just kind of a guy who's strong, and then we shoot him 6 times, he falls, and he's gone. And that's a great, scary, weird ending. And we get all this, who's the boogeyman? What is the boogeyman? It's a ghost. Loomis then goes, it was the boogeyman. It's a very interesting, tense moment with the idea that it would be an anthology series and we would never come back here. Then we came back in Halloween 2, which I think is a really good movie, but I think all the ideas in it may have poisoned everything we try to do with this franchise. We start to get into the paganism in that movie. We start to get into, he's so much more, and he's ascending into something. Correct. And I'm like, well, now we're getting into this like unanswerable questions, and the answers are never satisfying.
No,
because in our one timeline, we end up in the producer's cut of 6 with pagan rocks, and there's rituals, and he's being revived under the bridge in 5, and we're passing evil like it's a virus onto this girl, but we're not really exploring what that means. And then in like Halloween H2O, it's a lot of like internalized, I just tried to forget, I don't want to admit who I am, and then we cut his head off. Then we do all the weird nonsense in Resurrection, which is not even worth talking about.
Nope.
Season of the Witch doesn't have Michael Myers. And then we're here where, we see in the first Halloween a woman ready to fight back against her trauma. She's ready, she's prepared, she wants to do it. This is part of the healing process. And then the fear comes from almost over preparation. There's a lot of fear in that movie of just like, is there overreactions? Are we not listening? Are we ready? What happens when you don't listen to the only person who actually knows what they're talking about?
Right.
It's almost scarier in that way.
And you have a family who feels like their mother has lost her mind because this thing has been gone for my entire lifetime. I have no idea what you're talking about. Everything's fine, Mom. Stop being over prepared. Like that. Those are fun things to sort of play with and expound upon, which I think that 2018 film does a really good job of.
And then you get into all the traps and these doors and it's great.
Yeah.
It's something we hadn't done in the franchise, and there was enough money behind it to really make you look at it. And then we get here, and we spend a lot of time, we're sort of back to some of the Gordon Green stuff. If you didn't like the silly jokes and the silly moments, you're not going to like them now. No. And some of it is just a little bit much. Like, it didn't really bother me in 2018. You had small moments of, there's peanut butter on the penis. I was like, we don't need this. This is just stupid. But in this movie, it's almost always like before someone dies.
It's typically, and it bothered me. It's typically when they're introducing, because we don't get any type of connection to the people, most of the people that Michael kills because the body count's so high. So they'll introduce these people and make sort of stereotypes or caricatures of people, and they do it in these little insanely not funny, jokey ways that you're like, okay, I guess.
Right. And I actually didn't mind going back to the first Halloween night and seeing these threads. There's enough in the first movie that I didn't know that we needed to be like, oh, but it also gave us a sense of what this timeline's Halloween 2 would have been. And that's an interesting enough idea. And I was like, I kind of like, oh, he shoots his partner and he's traumatized about that. And now we have two characters stuck in the hospital saying it's their fault. And then you kind of get into this weird stuff. It's about the house and what is he looking at? And he was staring. One day he snapped. And these were all such interesting pins to put up. And we never knocked them down.
Right.
There was never any payoff to like, well, he goes home. I was like, oh, well, if he goes home, let's just board up the doors and windows
Right.
and leave, burn the house down,
Yeah.
burn it all to the ground.
Because he's nowhere to go. He's just aimless person.
Yeah, he's just we don't need to do this anymore. We can just burn it up. It's abandoned. No one goes into the Mike Myers house. He wants to stand up there and look at the window for the rest of his life. Great.
Sure.
Let's let him do it. I don't care. Just don't go in that house.
Yeah.
Very simple, but people would do it. But then this mob mentality stuff, that was also a really interesting idea, but it doesn't get very deep beyond, we think that's Michael, let's chase this guy till he jumps out a window.
Yeah.
We're just chanting and chanting and chanting. We don't really grow these characters very much. It feels like the B-side of Halloween 2018. And I just don't believe that we're setting up any pins, because we talked a little bit last week about like, oh, the send-off for our heroes and this allowance to die. You're James Bond, you're Tony Stark, you're Logan. And I'm getting the sense that that's where we're getting with these horror movies. We have Scream 5 coming up. We have this Halloween franchise. The rights are seeming to be settled for Jason. I was like, is it time to say goodbye to our heroes and villains in these worlds too? And I was like, oh, well, what a great place to continue that conversation. But I'm starting to wonder, can you give a horror hero a proper send-off? What does that even look like? Because they have to survive.
Right.
Giving people permission to die in our hero movies, in theory, here, we should be giving them permission to live.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know how you give a hero or a villain a send-off, but the problem is, I don't think this film had a message or a point, and I definitely don't think it was intent on necessarily bridging to whatever they did for whatever they're planning to do for Ends. Especially now that I kind of have an idea. We'll talk about at the end what they plan to do with Ends. It's clear that there was no clear direction to connect these films as well as I think they're pretending to be. I feel like that first film, 2018. Halloween, could have ended and been the perfect sort of culmination and wrap up. Like, we're like, all right, cool, they got Michael, he's gone. Because at that point, we're still under the belief that he is flesh and blood. He's just an old man. He's still insane, but he is still flesh and blood, and you can do something. This film is trying to do that same. It's starting to borrow some of the same things that the original timeline did, where it's like, cool, now we're going to make him bigger than life. And so then my point is, well, then why are we here? The only thing that you are really doing different is you're not saying that they're related, which
I like. Yeah. I like that. Oh, no, I like them not being related.
I agree.
Yeah, it is weird because I do wonder, why are we here?
Yeah,
I think a lot of people do, and we looked at the 2018 one as this, to that same kind of idea of like these send-offs. I was like, well, that was the send-off. She was ready. Laurie Strode was ready. She defeated evil. She can now go live, and her family can live. And then we just kept making the movies. So we didn't really do it.
Right.
And now you're almost telling her, hey, all that for a drop of blood is almost what Karen says to her. Yeah. Like, who cares? And then you get into this other like kind of weird, like, oh, well, it's about the house, and he doesn't care about you, Laurie. And a part of me is like, well, that almost I feel like would hurt her, that it becomes random. Which is almost scarier. That's what the original fear was in Halloween. But we're not really doing that anymore. So all of these threads from 2018 are seemingly dropped. We're not talking about him talking anymore, or the inability to speak, or whatever he said to that old doctor. We sort of quickly address him and then do my biggest pet peeve in a movie where everyone has half the information. And I was like, this granddaughter needs to sit Judy Greer down and say, it is not about, she is not coming to the hospital. He is going home because I know that because I was talking. I was like, everybody needs to get on the same page.
Just like, right, let everyone stop for a minute, listen to each other, give everybody each other the facts, and like, he's not coming here.
We're trying a little too hard to do Empire Strikes Back, Guardians 2, and break
By
the teams
separating
up.
the teams.
We're doing a little too much of that. But yeah, like, why are we here? And the first thing I hit with was we've never explored, well, we have. We have never explored in this multiverse version of it
Yes.
what the trauma does to the community.
Mhm.
And at first I was like, well, this is very interesting. We're going to get into this, like, oh, this small neighborhood where nothing happens, but something happened, which is like every horror monster movie is the small town of the Midwest or the South, and then the monster shows up or the killer shows up and it defines the neighborhood forever. We've all heard the true crime podcasts.
Mhm.
So we do that here to only have this guy who we're barely introduced to, have everyone think he's Michael because he was in a car, but the man is like 2 feet shorter than Michael.
Okay, it bothered the shit out of me. I'm like, you guys have seen photos of this person. Tommy, you alone have seen this person firsthand. How do you even remotely close to thinking that person is Michael? Like, how?
That's how I felt. I was like, everybody knows this guy. Laurie knows him. Judy Greer knows him. Everybody has seen Michael Myers. And now we're all freaking out. And I'm sure that that's part of the point of like the mob mentality, can focus on the wrong thing. And everyone's so focused on getting him that they don't care if they're right or wrong. But we never slowed down enough in the hospital to do anything with that.
Yeah.
It feels like we're just shooting B-roll of a music video where people are running through a hospital. And then like the people who should be sane, the doctors, the cop, all get involved in this. And I was like, there's no voice of reason.
That's there's no voice of reason. You get Judy doing it, but it's too late at that point because the top has already been taken off of this thing.
Yeah, I was like, this cop needs to pull out a gun and shoot up at like a stereotypical moment. We've knocked Laurie Strode, the survivor, down. She should be the hero of this town. And when she falls, everyone should have stopped.
Agreed.
Like there wasn't really any control in the chaos.
Yeah.
And I think of other like mob mentality moments in movies, and it's always a little slower because the mob is enough. Even in, like, you go back to the original Frankenstein, right? This was the first mob mentality. It's like the monster's not him, it's the people. And look at what this does. And he's actually like, why aren't we going back to that?
Right.
We did that in black and white.
Yeah.
And it was way more effective than this was. And we're just chanting over and over. And you get the sense that they almost added more of that in the last 2 years to be like, see, it's like us. And I'm like, but it's not.
Yeah.
I see what you're going for.
But it's you're handling this incorrectly. It feels very ham-fisted and cheesy. Here's what's funny, because I thought it was working at the very beginning when Tommy does his deliverance, his in the bar, when he tells the story and they all sort of come together. I was like, this is good. We're on to something here. And then from that point, it de-evolves the entire time. We get shots of Tommy going around to random people like, let's get together, let's do this. And I'm like, who are these people? Where are you coming? Where is this connection coming from? Like, you're just finding people off the street, like, hey, you look like you could probably be in a mob with me. Let's go ahead and join forces together. And none of it.
Well, yeah, he like drives through the street and he's like, if you can fight, join me. And if not, go home.
Some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard in my entire, I was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, I was like, there's so much about this movie I enjoy, and it's mostly the kills and Michael and everything else. I'm like, the further I get away from it, the more I'm like, God, I really just hope that we're setting up for something awesome, and I don't believe that we are. So
I don't know if you've heard this, and this is when I was like, oh, they really don't know what they're doing with this. Apparently, the Halloween Ends is going to have a time jump and be 5 years into the future and deal with real life stuff, pandemic. So the pandemic will be a part of it, and it'll be post-pandemic is where the next Halloween takes place. And I'm like, why? Yeah,
I don't know that I need that. I don't know that, because I heard that too. We're going to get into misinformation and fake news, and I was like, but isn't almost every story dealing with misinformation?
Right.
Isn't this movie dealing with misinformation? Don't we have a mob that all believes one thing and they are misinformed?
Correct.
Don't we have a family who's not listening to the
To the
matriarch of
matriarch
their family?
who's been through all of this.
Or do
Yeah,
we not already have? Like, this is the whole thing is fake news.
correct.
Every horror movie is like, the ring tape doesn't do the ring stuff. The Ouija board is not filled with a demon.
Yeah,
Every movie is
all the
misinformation.
time, and that's just how
We
horror movies
start this
work.
franchise with, well, I heard that they were siblings, and I heard they call all of that misinformation. Like, we're also, by the time this comes out, we'll be in like year 3 of the pandemic.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I don't know what else you're going to add by infusing the slasher genre to it. And it's very weird to me. We're back into like, why didn't you have a plan? We're back in the Star Wars sequel
It's
land.
not yet.
And I'm like, you announced these 2 movies, Kills and Ends, back to back at Comic-Con in June of 2019. I was under the assumption that y'all had written 2 scripts.
right. Yeah, and it's clear that you
No?
wrote one, and then you're like, I have some words on a blurb for a second one, but we haven't written a script. That's literally what they
Like,
done.
it's horror and the slasher genre are great places for like political and social commentary. But I don't know that Michael Myers is the messenger for, and I could be wrong. This could come out in a year and I'll sit
It'd
on
be
this
great.
podcast and be like,
Yeah,
oh,
but I think, I mean, stuff like The Purge, we sort of expect to have those political messages because they've sort of always been ingrained in the DNA of what those films are. And then a lot of horror movie is based on like social class. We've talked about this from previous stuff. Like that's sort of what these films do. But I never have gotten that inclination from anything that Michael Myers or Jason have ever done. So it's kind of very, very difficult for me to be like, cool, now we're going to get really politicized in this. I guess, but it doesn't feel like that. The only reason why I have a problem with that for this is that in the 2018 Halloween, we got none of that. And I feel like if you're doing a trilogy, then you would have planted the seeds there first.
yeah, that theme was much more personal. We weren't really doing
Right.
any like big things. And now it's like, how does this killer, if anything, you would almost want to like, they had the podcasters in 2018. I'm like, if anything, he should now be a true crime phenomenon, and we should be dealing with like the trauma of I don't know what we're going to do. It doesn't matter. But I'm like, if we're doing trauma of a person, trauma of a city, I guess trauma of a country would be next.
So
But it really is I don't know. That makes me less excited, I think.
yeah, it does for me too. And especially I think just the way that this movie ends, where I was like, now I really don't care about it, because they do the whole thing where they try to make him more than a man, which is, I guess that's an option. Although
It's what we keep doing.
Yeah, it's like, why do we go right back to that? But the way that they do this in this, like, just pissed me off, because this whole movie, they're talking about evil never dies, and like, we're gonna be a mob, we're gonna be a mob, we're gonna mob up. They get him. They have a sequence when Michael Myers is in the middle of the street, picks up his mask, and is like, all right, let's do this. And they're all surrounding him, and they all attack him one by one.
Yeah, they really go turtles against Shredder.
Not how a mob works at all, guys. You're going to lose this.
No, yeah, that was such a cool setup, because I was like, he puts on the mask, and I was like, oh, this is
they're
great.
Yeah,
and then there's like Leonardo goes, and then Donatello goes, and then Mikey goes, and there's just no Casey Jones to crush him at the end. Like, so it doesn't really work. But the setup to even get to that plan didn't work for me, because you've got 2 people in the house getting annihilated. And then
why they separate in that house still does not make sense to me.
Did none of these people watch Scooby-Doo? Like, we're trying so hard. This is the middle movie, which is always a challenge in a trilogy, I think, because it's generally when the hero loses, but it's a horror franchise, so the hero is constantly losing. That's kind of its bag. You're dealing with a big cliffhanger, which they don't really do, especially if you're going to do a time jump into post-COVID.
You actually
world.
take the weight out of the button at the end of this if you're doing a time jump.
Right. Yeah, right. I was like, oh, we're just going to move on.
Right.
But then you get this bizarre plan that, like, Karen, Judy Greer, is acting as if her daughter being in the house is part of the plan. She shows up, stabs him in the back, which she can only do if the daughter's being attacked. This was not discussed prior.
No.
Takes off his mask, which we've now established to everybody that it is about the house. So part of me was like, she's going to take his mask and he's just going to go
He's just
upstairs.
gonna go right
and
back
be done.
upstairs because
He doesn't care.
I don't give a shit about the mask.
Yeah, it works. This mask that he just picked randomly out of a Halloween store in the 70s, it lures him out.
Right.
She then runs a full block and a half to a like circle of cars that at first I was like, oh cool, we're gonna do some like sign shit and pincer in between these cars. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
And then we turtles won him. Then we had this weird dual monologue with Laurie Strode and the cop about how it's nobody's fault. And then he says, if only we knew then what we know now. And Terrence, if I said that to you, you would go, Blake, what new information do we have?
What do we know now?
And I would have an answer for that. And I walked down, I was like, what is he talking about? Because we haven't established anything supernatural.
No.
We haven't established that he can like heal or the paganism. We haven't done any of that work.
Especially
we just
for
keep
the two
saying he's not a man.
Especially for the two of them who have been on a bed cart the entire movie. So they've gained no more knowledge of anything than the film before, which that was not brought up at all.
It's like all they know is he's looking out the window. That's like the new piece of the lore is this window. And he's looking at himself or he's looking at something. But I was like, what are you guys talking about? And they say that, and then he gets up and he kills everybody.
Yeah.
And then you cut back to Karen and the daughter on the ground. It's full spoiler alert. You know, she goes upstairs to look out the window, and I thought she's going to see something out that window, and it's going to be awesome, and we're going to cut, and Halloween Ends is going to be all about whatever Michael's been looking at.
Whatever the hell she's, right, whatever he's
No,
been staring
she
at.
just gets stabbed. Michael's behind her.
Yeah.
End of film. You now have no heroes left.
Nothing. Yeah. I mean, a part of the reason why they got to do a time jump is just to get Jamie Lee back on the board because she's too injured to be effective if they continue right after this film.
So then I have to beg the question, are we even doing anything new? Because we've been to the hospital setting in Halloween 2. We did the mob mentality in Halloween 4. We've killed the main character in almost every horror movie ever made. We have done like kind of cliffhangers. We've done big family reveals. That's like Scream's back. And the surprising I'm behind you don't know about it is like the most famous kill in Friday the 13th when he comes in through the window with the bag on his head. So like we're now just mining all these different wells, pretending it's new and pretending we're going somewhere different. And even frankly, a post-COVID pandemic world, horror has explored. Like we've done what is this going to be? Quiet Place meets Halloween.
I say we have movies like this, A Quiet Place, and pretty much the 21 Days Later, like those type of films exist. So I don't really know what and exist, and I would say probably do a much better job of it. So I don't know what you're going to pencil in here because you have to do that plus still be a slasher film.
I mean, unless this is really going to be like the media's misreporting on Michael Myers and it's okay to live in Haddonfield, like we're going to do some Watchmen Go Back to New York campaign. Like,
right.
What, you know what I mean? I'm like, what are you even going to do with that?
I think they also, they sort of pin yourself into a corner when you make Michael Myers this supernatural killer. And then we go into this last one, like this ends. So you now have to posit and explain why he's supernatural or why that is the way it is. And have to explain how we are capable of stopping him because you've now built him to be more than just flesh and blood.
Yeah. And I really just don't think we're setting up anything.
No, I feel like they're just winging this. These are folks who are like, hey, I like Halloween. I'm going to do my own thing with Halloween. I'm going to create a story, which is fine. But if you're going to posit the fact you're doing a trilogy, that I really am annoyed that these studios and whatnot are giving folks the license to do trilogies without having any type of a story past the first film.
Yeah, at least think about trilogies when you make them. You don't have to go in with a 5-year plan.
No.
But you know how a trilogy works.
You do.
You know what these things service. Service your story, service your character. Let's get something new. Now there were things that I liked. We've been kind of hard on this for a while, but the question of why are we here? I'm like, for
I
money,
don't
I
have an answer.
guess.
I don't have an answer
I
for
really
right.
don't.
Yeah.
And a part of me is like, maybe we'll have an answer in a year. Maybe Halloween Ends will have some like big grandiose thing that ties all four of these movies together, if you include John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
And we'll have this very cool, deep, interesting thematic story.
And I said that in regards when I reviewed this for the YouTube channel. I was like, I'm gonna review this now, but I kind of hold my final feeling until I get that third film to see if there's an overarching story that they're telling. And the fact that I heard that the pandemic thing was sort of a part of it soured me a little bit, but I still was like, well, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Let them finish this, and then I will see how I feel.
Let's see.
Yeah.
But like, we'll be back here rebooting again and again and again and again. But then, I don't know. Then you get into the humor of it, which sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But this is not the Scream franchise, and this is not like horror with humor. I feel like go very hand in hand. They're cousins. Set up, punchline. Set up, scare. But it's almost used here to diffuse the people that we're killing. And I feel like that's when I want to sympathize and empathize with them the most.
Right.
And we keep making them like we kill one of them right after he gets rejected and is walking around being like, the dance made me horny. And I'm like, I don't kill this kid.
He should be dead.
What are we doing? Like, there's so many just weird moments where I'm like, why did we just deflated that like character in their final moments?
The older couple, their moment should not be played for laughs, but that's where it comes off. And so by the time that it ends, even their death sequence when Mike, which I think is cool, and it's all cool to do service for Mike, but him like taking knives out of the block and just stabbing him over and over until he gets the knife that he wants is great for him.
I also like that moment because there's a weird part about Michael that no one really talks about, where he's sort of a performance artist.
Oh,
he,
100%.
Even in the first one, I got to go get the grave.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go kill this woman.
Oh, he's all set up.
Near the
he's
woman.
Like he, as broken and crazy as this person is, he has a game. He's like, I'm gonna dig up my sister and put her in the bed and like put the cemetery, like the block here. You're gonna be in for a show.
And then I'm gonna put your friends strategically around. It's gonna be cool. Like he keeps kind of doing this, and a part of me is like, oh, we've never really seen him work as an artist. And here he is with these knives, like figuring it all out.
Like
so I was like, that's kind of cool.
When he just looks over and he's like, oh, you have a knife, and how he does with the halogen light. I was like, oh, Michael is in this. Like he's thought some of this stuff
through. He's a performer, he's a tortured artist. That'll be this misinformation, really. If he had done well in art school,
he would be a macabre artist. I like this
bought
guy.
him those finger paints for Christmas, the year before Halloween. But no, the easy bake oven, and then he got that knife, and then the rest, as they say, is history. So it's interesting, and I feel like if you weren't a fan, whatever you felt about 2018 is how you feel here, and I feel like that's how you'll feel it ends.
But, yeah. I agree. I think it's going the wrong way. I really much appreciated the character study of 2018 more than I did this, where this just becomes like, this is a typical slasher.
Just shallow action, slash. We're back to the slashers.
But there is some fun slashing stuff in here. Like Michael is having some fun kills. I love to see, there was, for the first time, especially in these films, we have like African-American couple in here, and they get their comeuppance just like everybody else does, and it's pretty brutal how they do it. I was like, there are some inventive depths here, and this is where you can see the time was spent on those. And I won't ruin them because they're glorious, but they are some fun deaths in here. I just wish that the script matched the level of intrigue or interest that went into those deaths.
It's very interesting because I'm like, clearly he can direct horror. Because there's very tense moments, there's gory moments, there's scary moments. Even when he's just far away from the park with the kids, I'm like, that's great.
It is.
A lot of great stuff with our LGBTQ couple that's in the house. A lot of good stuff with them. I just feel like they made this awkward middle movie and then didn't have this like third one set up. And I was really prepared for a giant cliffhanger and go, well, now what? And instead, I'm just sort of like, yeah, it's just going to be Halloween 3. Like,
Yeah, like this doesn't either A, make me excited for the third one, or have a thread long like that's big enough. I'm like, man, I can't wait till we get back to this world. I left that movie like, yeah, that's pretty much what I expected to happen. I guess we're gonna do something different. He's gonna
yeah,
finish
like
the rest of the family in 3. I don't know.
parts of it were kind of cool, seeing the different ways that he's traumatized these people, this cop who shot his partner, this town that's freaking out. I was like, there's a lot of things,
I
but we don't
was
really take the time to let them bake.
It's funny because the marketing for this had been leaning in pretty heavy to legacy characters, or the characters that survived the first one, survivors, if they will. And like the opening act with Tommy doing the announcement at the bar, that was all really well done. I thought was handled pretty quickly.
The most awkward, though, welcome to our talent show. I'm going to shine this light at these murder survivors, and now watch this ventriloquist act. What?
Yeah.
Guys, before we get started on our fun, goofy night, did you know we had 3 people who were victims of a serial killer here today? They are right there.
And then that one was the survivor. That one had her daughter kid. Like, stop.
Stand up, man. Take a bow. Hey.
But we end up, they don't last long. And so you're kind of just like, well, then I feel like that's your story right there. Like the survivors.
Yeah, brought them back just to be like, they're back.
They're back to be fodder. Like I feel like that's sort of the story here, is just sort of explain how the survivors, whatever trauma they've gone through, that would have been the better play here. Instead, we get Tommy being a caricature of a person who just lost his mind. It's like, I'm so angry, let's fight. And the rest of them we don't really know much for. And Laurie is on the bench for the entire movie.
Yeah. Right. And then even like the daughter who goes off on her own is pretty much relegated to being in the back of this car the entire time.
Which was a bizarre choice. Again, this poster and these posters have the strode women. I think it even has a tagline about how strong the women are. But none of them do anything in this.
No, film. The script doesn't really allow them to. And we spend most of it, like most of the story comes from this police officer who we didn't know about.
Right. And Tommy, like that's literally that's the story here.
Yeah, and this like kid who was trick-or-treating and had him standing over. Because also for adding a lot of legacy characters, they were also like, there were other ones though.
These are legacy characters that you may not have seen. They said their name once, but we're gonna make
it. Like, oh, we're doing Mortal Kombat video game rules now, or if they were introduced in the 3rd game, we're gonna reboot them into the 1st one. You know,
they've been here the whole time.
He was there.
He was on the other side of the street. You just didn't look that way.
Playable. You just didn't know. A lot going on. It's interesting, but it is. This movie is.
No, so this movie does a lot of that. Go ahead.
But you know, it's on track to do like 50 million. So obviously we're going to be fine. The Halloween franchise isn't going anywhere.
Which is an interesting number, considering that it was also released on Peacock. It's clear that no one chose to watch it in that manner.
No, well, I guess Malignant kind of proves the other side. But one, Peacock has ads if it's free. Peacock has ads if you pay. I give so much money to Peacock. $10 of my dollars a month go to this stupid Peacock app so I can watch shows that I enjoy. And they do make a lot of good original content. If you haven't seen Girls 5 Ever or One of Us is Live.
Girls 5 Ever, Saved by the Bell. There's some good stuff over there on Peacock.
And yet, it is not enough for me to watch a newly released film without ads. I would rather just pay the $10 and go to the theater then. Because the Peacock ads are just for Peacock. I'm here. I'm giving you all the money I can give you.
Please subscribe to this the service that you are currently watching.
I'm already here. Stop. This is insane. It should know that I'm here, or it's just something that I'm in the middle of watching. I was like, I'm not going to start Halloween Kills to then have a trailer for Halloween Kills on the app that I'm watching it on. We're not doing that. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. I also think like this to me is a movie you have to see in a theater because I really enjoyed it. And then the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, it's a little silly, isn't it? But the
communal experiences for horror movies are still a thing. And I think that's a part of it. Like people are like, I want to be around other people that want to experience this together, and we can kind of go through this ride as one. Whereas if you're watching this at home, you really don't get that. So I that makes sense.
Right. That's kind of how I feel. I'm like, oh yeah, we're here. I think we're trained to see this one in a theater. Franchise stuff. When you look at Malignant, I'm like, well, it was an original movie.
Mhm.
People will stay home and not risk it. But this is Halloween Kills.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it lives up to that name.
he does. He kills a lot.
So yeah, I would say if you're feeling safe and up to it, see it in a theater, but they have the Peacock option. I'm still all about this split. We're still in the pandemic, so I say
I
let's keep
like
splitting
having
it
an
up.
option. Like if there's a movie that I don't want to see in the theater, I wish all films gave me the option. I'm probably always going to default to going to a theater, unless there's something like timing wise. I just can't like, oh, I can't get out of work fast enough, and I don't feel like going to like the 9 o'clock show. Screw it, I can just cut it on whenever I want to. Give me the option. I'm not one, but I know there are a lot of spots that are starting to get pretty heavily affected again. So give the option. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that comes out that I'm still like, oh, I would just watch this at home if I could, and save 2 trips to Burbank.
Right. Like I want to see The Last Duel. There's no way that I'm watching. I'm going back. I'm not going back this weekend to another theater to watch it. Yeah.
No. Well, guys, I think that's our show. That's Halloween Kills, one of the most anticipated movies of the year that I think left us wanting more. Ironically, more of what we had before. Like now, I'm like, find the middle ground, story and kills. I want them both.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully, there's a big payoff. Hopefully, we can see all the things we want to see. And if not, I don't know. Give it another 10 years. They'll make another one.
And Jamie Lee will be 85.
We'll keep going. Who cares?
Yeah.
Man in a white mask killing some babysitters. That's all you need for that first one to work.
That's it.
We'll keep doing that forever. And you will have to keep listening to us forever by hitting subscribe and leaving us a review. And you can then follow the show on Hollywood ADI on Twitter and Instagram. Terrence has all the other reviews and trailer reactions on our YouTube channel, which you can also subscribe to. And then we have our 2 spin-off podcasts, The Marvel Pair Up, about Disney Plus shows with the history of a genre that they're in, be it time travel, sitcoms, or Marvel's own movies. And then we have You Can't Do That Anymore, about movies that you might not be able to do anymore in today's world, be it because they haven't aged well or because they just wouldn't make any money. And we will see you guys next week.
Later.